Ascent to the Underworld. Ransk Internet Herald, editor's address. With this text, I, Sergey Kharin, draw your attention to the fact that all the articles that have come from my pen over the years have been nothing more than a pathetic attempt to reflect some truth of life. The publications, for which I received worldwide recognition, I long considered my main achievements, but only now I understand that they are all worthless compared to what I will describe below. Now I realize that I was, and perhaps remain, essentially a traitor who walked over heads and in pursuit of the golden light of fame caused more harm than good with my work. Nevertheless, while the memories are fresh and while no one has seized control of my mind, I want to bring you a message, a text that I consider truly, if not the best, then certainly the most important in my career. Read it and take it as seriously as possible. My words are not a joke and not a banal attempt to draw attention to a cheap sensation. I also assure you that it is written not for worldly glory or empty entertainment, but only so that you may find the path. So, already completely blind, lying in a hospital ward, I plunged into darkness. The venom of an arachnid from Marushkino was killing me. The doctors couldn't help me, although they tried conscientiously. Every breath was difficult for me. My lungs burned, and no matter how many breaths I took, it wasn't enough. The oxygen simply wasn't being absorbed. However, breathing through the tube made it easier. At some point, I even thought I was recovering. That very evening, I was even able to sit up on my own, and even though with difficulty breathed without instruments. For the first time I talked to people with such pleasure. Only after losing this ability you do begin to appreciate it. I wanted to call someone, talk, discuss something, anything, perhaps even some nonsense. I really wanted to, but over the years of betrayal and pain that I brought to the world, I lost all friendly ties and contacts. I had no one to call. That night I went to bed determined to change my life and full of hope for a possible recovery. That night I died. There was absolute darkness around me. I hung in a complete vacuum and couldn't control my body. My limbs dangled limply in space, uncontrollable. Only when they collided with each other I did experience inexpressible pain. From it my whole body wanted to scream. Maybe it did scream, but no sounds were heard. I couldn't move nor make any, even the smallest squeak. I just prayed that my limbs would stop colliding, causing me new suffering. They continued to do so with persistent tenacity. How long did I hang in this place? An hour, a day, or maybe 100 years? I don't know. I felt a fall. Some force pulled me down, and from a sharp attack of fear, control over my body returned to me. My breath caught from the speed, and I could only scream and quickly move my hands in an attempt to grab onto something during the fall. This continued until a hard obstacle crashed into me. Having lost consciousness, I came to, blinded by a golden light that came from the heavens and warmed me. I found myself on the edge of a dead, gloomy forest with wild trunks frozen in deformed poses. Before me opened an endless, lifeless space, filled to the horizon with people who seemed to wander aimlessly from side to side. A little later, I realized that the people were moving towards a mountain range that rose so far away that it was incomprehensible how long this transition would take. The high spires of the mountains, their sharp fangs bared against the heavens, disappeared with their peaks into the thickness of the clouds. It seemed to me as if it were the monstrously gaping maw of some predatory creature. Above all this towered a golden luminary that illuminated everything around with a warm light. The warmth of this luminary was so alluring that it was almost impossible to resist it. Stretching my hands towards it, I even took a few steps towards the golden sun to feel its softness, to become a part of it. It seemed to me that it was so close that just a little more and I would be able to touch it. I would be able to feel its soft and warm structure, which would envelop me, fulfilling all my innermost dreams. Touching the golden sun was the only thing that interested me now. Its light was the only thing that mattered. "So you are Sergey Kharin?" I heard behind my back, and only now could I tear my gaze away from the golden light. Turning around, I saw him, a tall, slender man, dressed in a black tailcoat. His jacket with rounded edges reached his knees. Along the sides of the tailcoat was embroidery of gold thread, interwoven into symbols I didn't understand. The stranger's coal-black hair was neatly styled and tied with a gold ribbon. Black eyes, devoid of whites, studied me intently, and a short smile barely showed on his pale lips. "Yes, that's me," I replied with distrust. "To whom do I have the pleasure of speaking?" "I am but a servant of my master. My name will mean nothing to you," the being replied, and smiling wider and baring rows of sharp fangs predatorily added, "I have come to guide you." "And actually, where are we?" "Yes, you humans usually need a lot of time to understand this place," the being replied and spread its arms as if pondering. "And some never understand it at all. We are in hell, Sergey. At least that's what you call this place." "I'm not surprised that I ended up here," I replied, thoughtfully surveying the rocky wasteland that stretched before us. "I just thought it would be hotter here or something." "Yes, many are surprised. Hell is constantly changing and rebuilding in response to changes in human existence. So for you, the changes will not be critical. And although there are hot places here too," the servant looked at me conspiratorially and putting the edge of his palm to his mouth, as if telling a secret, whispered, "Frankly, I like this version of hell more than the previous one." The being looked at me expectantly and added, "Are you ready to go, Sergey?" "Where are we going?" "We will go to my, as yet just my master, and I will lead you along a safe path." "Do I have the option to refuse?" "Absolutely none, Sergey. Everything here happens according to the master's will. I can bring you to him by force at any moment, but he wants me to give you a tour," the servant replied, gesturing invitingly towards a yellow path that appeared from behind his back. The yellow ribbon stretched to the horizon, sometimes winding like a snake, sometimes straightening like an arrow. Together we moved forward. Before us opened a view of endless wastelands, over which hung dark blue clouds, covering the sky to the very horizon and stretching somewhere beyond. Thick, heavy thunderclouds constantly changed their shape. Everything quickly changed its shape. Regularly colliding with each other, the clouds flashed with lightning and rumbled with thunder, spewing streams of rain, walls of rain, which quickly turned into rivers, sweeping away everything in their path. The streams carried the gaping sinners to the edge of space, where they disappeared into a hellish chasm. As soon as the elements ceased to rage, the light of the golden sun dried the surroundings, and the empty space was again densely filled with the bodies of people. Sinners moved, pushing each other with their shoulders. Here and there fights broke out between them. Somewhere these were minor skirmishes, but in some places the battles occupied a space in which it seemed a medium-sized city could be placed. On the horizon, mountains were visible, which also rested their peaks against the heavens, and between them, great oceans reflected the light of the golden luminary. All this simultaneously seemed so far away that it was simply impossible to reach it, and so close that it was as if you could reach out and touch either the mountains or the clouds. From this incredible distance, I could make out the backs of strange, eerie creatures emerging from the water. Huge birds soared in the sky, emitting loud screeching sounds. Sharply diving into the crowd of sinners, they grabbed souls with their long sharp beaks and tore them apart in the heavens, spilling a bloody rain of their flesh onto the ground. People pushed each other into the mouths of the creatures, trying to protect themselves by giving their neighbor to be torn apart. In some places, sinners still gathered in groups and themselves attacked the winged monsters that had landed on the ground. They had no weapons, so fists and teeth were used. At the cost of many losses, they did kill the landed creature, and then I saw how people feasted on the remains of the defeated creature, driving away others, those who did not participate in the hunt. The feast continued exactly until the hungry winged creatures took away the remains of their relative, after which they devoured them high in the sky. Other people bowed as they walked and raised their hands to the sky, trying to reach the source of the golden light. The crowd of sinners was so dense that if someone fell, they immediately perished under the feet of those following behind. Such small, newly formed holes in the canvas of souls were quickly filled by those standing nearby, and the fallen were simply trampled into the mud and disappeared within it. People aged, their hair turned grey, they died and rose again to continue their journey, which possibly had no end. No one stopped us, no one attacked us. The yellow path of an unknown material, along which the servant led me, wound through the seething crowd of souls. No one but us stepped on it. I walked and couldn't take my eyes off this vigorous Brownian motion. Like the other sinners, I aged, died, and rose again. The servant walked at my pace. He didn't rush me. Apparently, he understood that we now had all the time in the universe, and there was no need to hurry. How long we walked I didn't understand. The luminary didn't change its position in the sky, as if it wasn't moving at all, frozen. To my questions about time, the servant replied that it didn't matter. A day or a year could have passed, or maybe thousands of years. Apathy. We found ourselves in a field full of grey mud. It was a swamp. A thick fog lay over the surface of the liquid. Golden light poured down on us, but darkness hung over the swamp, illuminated only by insects going about their business. Their abdomens, dimly shimmering, soared upwards, then descended to the very surface of the water. I noticed that the lingering lights that dared to fly above the darkness of the thick fog burned in a bright flash as soon as a golden wave of light touched their bodies. Reaching the edge of the water, I heard a cacophony of groans. People were embedded in the putrid swamp amidst the disgustingly grey, slimy mud. They were pressed so tightly against each other that they could barely move. Hands, feet, and heads stuck out of the dense pile of swamp mud. These people were alive, groaning, and these were not groans of pain or suffering. These were groans of routine, groans of unwillingness. It happens when there is some task to be done, but there is no desire to do it, and a groan of unwillingness escapes from the throat, a groan of disgust at what is happening, when your whole being rebels against any action. The servant led me through the swamp, and the bodies of the sinners served as our path. I walked on their yellow bodies, stepping on someone's stomach, then on their head, then on their face. The living pavement did not resist, but only changed the intonation of its groan each time I stepped on a new animate fragment of it. "Why are these people here?" I asked the servant. "Because they came here themselves. They have no craving for excessive suffering and no desire for excessive happiness. They don't strive for anything, and any existing state of affairs suits them. They don't want to create, build, or do anything at all. They like everything as it is. They simply exist. If they came here themselves, can they leave?" "Sergey, this place is wonderful because no one is locked up here, well, except for us, and the sinners are free to leave at any moment they wish. but you will see this for yourself later. A hand, swaying rhythmically, stuck out of the mud in front of me. Grabbing it, I pulled. I wanted to pull out at least one. Gripping the limp hand tightly, I pulled with all my might, but I didn't feel any reciprocal effort. The sinner didn't even try to help me pull him out of this mire. I continued to pull. The top of a head had already appeared above the surface of the swamp. The servant was impassively watching me all this time. When the sinner's head emerged completely from the mud, his mouth let out a loud, disgruntled wail. Then he hit me with his free hand and pushed me away. Soon the figure slowly sank back into the mire. The servant pointed me the way again and we moved on. Rage war. Having passed the swamp, we came out onto a beautiful meadow covered with a carpet of grass. The green ocean stretched far ahead and disappeared beyond the limits of my vision. As always, the idyllic landscape was disturbed by people. They were fighting. There was a constant battle going on here. People fought each other with a variety of weapons. Axes were pitted against swords, bows, pistols, automatic weapons, and muskets fought for the right of the strongest. People tore, cut, and shot each other as we walked by. They didn't stop for a second. Rage clouded their eyes. An eternity spent at war had honed the warriors' skills to perfection. They struck each other with a kind of perfect, cold-blooded efficiency. Every blow, every shot reached its target. The ground was irrigated with the blood of fallen enemies. Wounded and broken, the sinners could not stand and lay on the ground like chopped logs. But even in such a deplorable state, they tried to kill their enemies, each other. Everyone fought against everyone. Gradually, with each defeated enemy, with each severed limb, the beautiful green field became more and more red. Even individual green islands were eventually swallowed by the red wave, and then purple flowers sprouted from the ground. They gradually bloomed under the golden sunlight. When the flowers reached the end of their bloom, the wind tore off their petals, and caught in a whirlwind, they soared into the air. As soon as a petal touched a warrior's body, it immediately left severe burns. The burns were so severe that they temporarily quenched the sinner's endless thirst for murder, covering the warriors' bodies with bright red sores. There were countless petals. When they covered the warriors' bodies in a dense shroud, they immediately caught fire. The sinners ran in circles in agony, and their rage from the unbearable pain only became more insane. Only the most ferocious continued to hack each other, even in this wild state. This continued until every single warrior burned to ashes. Then the earth was again covered with a thick green carpet, erasing all traces of human presence. But the cycle repeated. Sinners reappeared from under the ground, rising from the ashes. They stubbornly climbed towards the warm golden light, reaching for it with their hands in a futile attempt to touch it. And the battle continued again. The servant and I relived the deaths and downfalls of human warriors again and again. We saw time and again how the earth became covered in blood, how again and again purple flowers bloomed, burning the warriors to ashes. I couldn't tear my gaze away from this vicious cycle, and I aged. I perished along with the warriors and was reborn again. A man was dying next to me. He was burning from the touch of purple petals. In agony, he arched his back, his skin and armor melting, forming a mixture of liquid metal and organic matter. His eyes rolled in their sockets, trying to focus on something. I reached out to him, wanting to pull him onto the yellow path with us. I wanted to end his suffering, to help at least someone. Again, seeing me and my outstretched hand, the eyes of the tormented soul focused. With one sharp swing of his axe, he chopped off some of the fingers on my right hand. Groaning, I looked at the servant. He was smiling. The creature showed me the way, and we moved on. Passivity. The master servant didn't tell me about time, about how long I had been here. He only replied that it didn't matter. Everything here happens with the master's knowledge, and time here does not contradict his will. We entered a dense, green, ancient forest. The trunks of the hellish trees were so wide that it seemed to me as if we were walking past each one for days. Their crowns reached high into the heavens and disappeared there, among the thick bluish plum clouds. Among the trees, the souls of sinners moved aimlessly, with lost and frightened eyes. Empty eyes. The roots and branches of the trees were in constant motion, swaying. They entangled people's limbs, pierced their bodies, and drew blood from them with pulsating movements, moving it along the vines to the trunks. The souls gradually became more and more entwined with vines and roots. Walled in by them, the apathetic sinners were inextricably woven into the fabric of the living wood. They didn't try to push the vines away, but only looked at what was happening with fear, submissively surrendering to fate. Only those who were walled in, and those from whom blood was being drawn, sluggishly stretched out their hands in hope of help from the others, but no help came. People continued to walk aimlessly among the trees, constantly looking around in terror. However, as soon as the roots came for them, they submissively surrendered to their will. Absorbing the sinners, the trunks of the mighty trees grew thicker before our eyes and stretched higher into the heavens. On their roots, blood-red ripe shoots berries were visible. The servant led me further along the yellow path. The Unborn. We reached a city full of light and music. The city was filled with fenced amusement parks and families strolling in enclosed areas. Children with tired and haunted eyes, in greasy tattered clothes, wandered the streets among the bright houses. Pathetic rags hung from their deathly thin bodies. Frightened, darting from corner to corner, they seemed to be trying to find refuge, to hide in the shadows for at least a second. But the golden light and music didn't leave them for a moment. Every street was filled with toy and candy stores. The signs were bright and mesmerizing. They beckoned, and it was hard to resist going inside. Beautiful paintings depicting scenes from the lives of happy families hung on the walls and under the roofs of houses. The parents in the pictures were caring, and the children were well fed and happy. The ragged children tried to cover their eyes and ears with their little hands. Some even injured themselves, just to avoid seeing these alluring pictures and hearing these attractive sounds. But their wounds invariably healed, and again they saw and heard all this joy and love for children, which they would never experience. The children hung in a trance, looking at the fresh food displayed in the shop windows. Their eyes darted, looking at the toys and sweets, and many looked and looked at the images of happy families, unable to look away. "Who are they?" I asked sadly. "These are the unborn and those who died in childhood. They are always surrounded by love, care, and joy, but they cannot touch them, taste them." The servant answered my question. "Why are they in hell? What are they guilty of? And this punishment is not for them. After all, those responsible for their death also see all this," the servant said with a smirk, and pausing for a second added, "Do you feel sorry for these children, Sergey?" "Honestly, no." I shook my head. "I really want to feel pity and help them all, but for some reason I can't, even though I understand that I should." The servant showed me the way, and we moved on again along the yellow path, passing millions of small unlived lives, and for some reason I felt nothing. Betrayal of oneself. We emerged into the center of a boundless metropolis. Towers of glass, concrete, and steel grew from the earth like the forests I had seen before, and they also disappeared behind thick gloomy clouds, through which a warm golden stream of an unknown luminary broke through. There were a huge number of people here, more than in other places we visited. The sinners did not run from side to side, they were not frightened. The perfect order was immediately apparent. It was in everything. People walked in even rows, one after another, in a dense stream, one by one. They all raised their hands up, trying to grasp a particle of golden light. Lined up in long queues, rows of sinners snaked around buildings. Everyone was waiting their turn to finally enter the building, full of endless offices. The servant led me along the yellow sidewalk past the queue, and I saw how people aged right in it. Their hair gradually turned gray, wrinkles left deeper and deeper furrows on their faces. With each lost year, these faces became more and more sad and restless. But it was not the loss of life years that worried the sinners, but the feeling of impatience, the feeling of regret that they would not have time to get inside. They wanted to enter the office buildings and take their places so badly that they did not pay attention to the centuries of waiting. Millennia passed, spent in queues and traffic jams on the way to the blessed offices. People died right on the street, falling from old age and exhaustion, raising their hands to heaven. No one helped the fallen, and the living passed by, looking with excitement and thirst at the entrance to the office building, lost in the distance. The fallen decayed. Their remains were carried on the soles of millions of feet, until the cycle repeated itself again. Again, the time came for them to be young and healthy among the sinners waiting for their entrance. People walked, but each step occurred only once a century. After the step of the first, the second took a step, then the third, and so on and so forth. From the side, it seemed to the servant and me as if a snake sleeping in its nest stirred in an attempt to wake up and start moving. But it was only an illusion, and nothing followed the timid attempt to wake up. The giant serpent fell deeply asleep again. People in offices bustled, were in perpetual motion. They constantly received notifications on computers and communication devices that were crudely implanted directly into their heads. Sinners filled out endless documents and did not understand what they were doing or why. All the created papers and reports were piled into one big heap and burned when there were so many of them that it was simply impossible to pass by. Everyone dreamed of rising higher through the floors and getting closer to the source of the golden light. The volume of work kept increasing. More and more papers were created. More and more reports flew into the fire. More and more notifications accumulated on the brain devices. Small people scurried around, constantly hurrying the office sinners in their activities, not giving them a second of rest or the opportunity to comprehend what was happening. As a result, people fell from exhaustion, from old age, and breathed their last with a quiet groan, raising their hands to the golden sun. The places of the dead sinners were immediately taken by new workers, and the process continued. Periodically, a few among the damned souls remembered their loved ones and relatives, that they should visit them, and had not contacted them for a long time. Slowly and imposingly, tall, invariably stout bosses, tightly clad in expensive suits, stretched towards them through the endless rows. Surrounded by a retinue of small managers quickly scurrying back and forth, they strode proudly and with a sense of self-importance. The small bustling figures would now and then slap the office sinners, shout at someone, and even bite someone. To the awakening workers, beginning to become aware of themselves, the fat boss demon spoke of what a great future awaited them in this company. They told them how long they had been watching them, promised that they would soon be able to touch the pure light of the golden sun. They convinced them that it was a difficult time, and now their fate was being decided, time to push harder, and loved ones can wait another day or maybe even a week, and nothing bad will happen. After all, they won't go anywhere really. You can go to them at any time, even tonight. It's just the most inopportune moment right now. As soon as the spark of consciousness in the sinner faded, the fat bosses, slowly and proudly pacing, crawled away, leaving behind a slippery, greasy trail. And even more small, bustling managers pounced on the sleeping worker. With shouts, blows, and insults, they forced the sinner to work even harder. And soon they burned out, drying up from the inside, and perished, sprawled on the floor, reaching out to the sun. And all just to live again after hundreds of years and stand in line again to get into the office building. This story has continued for many of our lives. I saw a man who, it seemed to me, had woken up. A fat boss was already slowly crawling, strutting towards him. Reaching out to him, I called him to come with me, showed him the yellow sidewalk, showed him the way, offered to go together. The sinner even started to reach out his hand to me, but the boss managed to put his arm around his shoulders and, whispering something in his ear, led him away. "We'll turn here," the servant spoke in one of my thousands of lives lived here, and again pointed to the yellow sidewalk that went high into the heavens. "Where are we going now?" "We're going to Pandemonium. The master is waiting for you." I wearily nodded in response. I realized that the time for my personal torture was coming. The narrow yellow path winding between buildings rose higher and higher. Finally, when I had time to turn gray again, we reached the heavens. As soon as we rose above the clouds, I was afraid that the golden light would blind me, and I, like a madman, would go to it, not thinking about anything else. But fortunately, my fears were not destined to come true. There was no light above the clouds. The golden sun shone only on those who were below, irresistibly beckoning them to reach upwards. At the top there was no light and there were no other sinners, only emptiness and the dim light of the stars. Their light was barely enough for me to see where I was stepping. Every step was difficult for me. Several times I even unsuccessfully placed my foot on the unevenness of our yellow path. I stumbled, and when, full of horror, I realized that I was falling from a height straight into the abyss of hell, the servant caught me. He invariably smiled at me and said, "Not yet." We walked forward for many more lifetimes, and I saw only twilight in the void and the silhouettes of human tortures far below. Beneath us stretched an endless labyrinth, its edges disappearing beyond the horizon, and we kept walking and walking further. A great black sea spread out before us. Sinners drowned again and again in its waves, which could easily cover the highest mountains on earth. With each death, they had less and less reason left, until people finally went mad. Cyclopean leviathans soared above the water's surface to the height of earthly skyscrapers, and crashed back down with a deafening roar, producing a monstrously loud clap. People were torn apart by them and perished, chewed by their fangs and jaws. The muzzles of gigantic amphibians appeared above the surface of the water and emitted a menacing rumble, the power of which stunned me. One of the creatures separated from the mass of sea monsters. Reaching the high wall where our yellow path was located, the anthropomorphic creature struck the first blow. I staggered but managed to stay on my feet. The ancient creature continued to furiously beat the wall with its enormous fists and long tentacles that protruded from its head. I was terrified, and looking into the Leviathan's eyes, I heard its call. I was lonely in the depths of the great sea. My race has disappeared without a trace. I hate all of you. Hear my call. Come and free me. There's no need to be afraid. The servant touched my shoulder, and I came to my senses at the very edge of the abyss, practically jumping down to meet the call of the tentacled giant. "Why?" I asked, still not fully recovered. "It doesn't make sense," the servant smiled. "Everything here happens with the master's knowledge and by his will. If it is his will, then it will happen, and nothing will change it. But he has other plans for you, Sergey, as far as I know." We walked on. Years later, the cyclopean creature was far behind us. Even its call, which had been ringing like an alarm bell in my head all this time, soon became a mere whisper and then disappeared completely. Several lifetimes later, we heard the sounds of battle. A battlefield opened up before us once again. A huge hole opened in the heavens, from which human-like creatures, clad in silver-gleaming armor, flew on wings woven from light. Moving with the speed of lightning, they pierced and hacked to pieces the bodies of the demons opposing them. Holding long spears of light, they cut down demons by the hundreds and thousands. But the demons also pressed the angels. Swarms of demons clung to the light warriors, sinking their teeth into them, tearing off whole chunks of flesh. A bright smoking liquid flowed onto the ground. The ground was covered with it. Demons and angels killed each other without count. Those who fell down were ground into mincemeat by bone blades and flowed out of pipes in a thick, luminous river. New demons were born from this river, which immediately rushed back into battle. What is this? I barely managed to squeeze out. What's happening here? These are angels trying to break through to save you. They perish by the thousands every second to save people, the servant replied and added with some bitterness, naive, as if it's in their power to do so. The servant touched my shoulder and we moved on. Gradually the sounds of battle subsided, and we found ourselves in a spacious but gloomy hall. The floor was covered with black and white marble tiles. In its very center stood a spiral staircase that led upwards and disappeared into a space of white light. Solitary souls walked across the mosaic floor, and reaching the stairs slowly climbed upwards, dissolving into this white light. Where are these people going? I asked the servant. These souls were able to overcome all the circles of hell and get out of here. Is that even possible? As I said, you are not locked here. The road to the light is not closed to you, and even from the darkest corners of hell, you can return if you want to. Why are there so few people here? Why aren't they all going here? I asked the servant. He, it seemed to me, paused for a second. People are waiting for someone to come and save them, but no one will come. And even if someone does come, it doesn't guarantee salvation. You either rise yourself and are saved, or you stay here, with us. I wanted to step off the yellow path and go to the stairs. I even moved my body in its direction, but the servant held me back, taking my shoulder, gently, but very firmly. Not yet. I had no way to break free, and we both understood that. We went on. After a while, our path turned into a staircase. It led down, somewhere into the darkness. We descended it for several more lifetimes. Suddenly something dripped onto my head, thick and dense. Touching my hair with my hand, I sniffed my fingers and looked at the servant. It's anointing oil, he said, seeing my uncomprehending look, and added with a smile, We've finally arrived. The lower we descended the stairs, the more frequent the drops became, gradually turning into a heavy downpour. We walked on the oily surface and somehow didn't slip. The rain didn't form puddles, but flowed away in thin streams, disappearing into the cracks of the buildings surrounding us. Tables laden with food from all corners of the world lined the staircase. There were simple dishes like scrambled eggs made from the eggs of all kinds of birds, as well as utterly wild dishes, the existence of which I hadn't even suspected, like variously prepared brains of exotic creatures from all accessible and inaccessible worlds. Music of all genres, played on all possible and impossible instruments, poured from everywhere. The sounds never ceased for a second. The sounds of violins, bagpipes, flutes, and other instruments merged into a cacophony of noise. Crucified people hung on the walls. Their skin was flayed, and their veins were pulled from their bodies. Women with long black hair played on them as if they were harps, and the crucified emitted satisfied, yearning sounds. The sinners laughed, rejoiced so intensely that the skin on their faces and bodies cracked, and blood flowed from the open wounds. Others immediately brought their golden goblets to the streams of this blood, and filled them so abundantly that the thick red liquid flowed down their hands. Laughing loudly and shouting with joy, the sinners raised their goblets towards the golden sun and poured the contents into their mouths. As they did so, they opened their jaws so wide that their faces tore and their jaw joints were dislocated. People rejoiced and laughed incessantly. They used each other on the tables among those eating amidst the cacophony of noise, doused in thick oil. In places people tore themselves apart and sewing themselves together formed giant fleshy heaps, devouring exquisite food and other people. Anointing oil flowed over this mountain of flesh, over this writhing and throbbing in ecstasy mass of flesh, hiding the seams, making the flesh golem more whole, integral. I recoiled. I wanted to run away, forgetting everything, but the servant held me firmly. It was then that I first tried to resist him, to strike him, but he only smiled at me. Not a single muscle in his face twitched. The servant lifted me off the ground by my shoulder and carried me to the head of a long table. No longer able to resist, I went limp in his arms, surrendering to his will. At the head of the table stood a rather modest-looking wooden throne. On it sat a modestly dressed man in a simple grey shirt and blue jeans, held up by a leather belt. Drops of oil avoided touching him. With a slight wave of his hand, the music, the rain, and the general rejoicing ceased. The delusion of eternal joy and pleasure vanished, and the sinners began to weep, moaning in pain and grief. The man looked away from me and at the sinners. Absolute deathly silence fell upon the world. Pushing off lightly from the ebony throne with its intricate symbols, the man soared into the air and floated effortlessly towards us. Every movement he made was perfectly graceful and natural, and his appearance was flawless. The servant fell to his knees as soon as the one who had been sitting at the head of the table approached. "Master," said the servant, lowering his head and not daring to look up. The man did not deign to look at the servant. The master looked at me appraisingly with the black whites of his eyes. "You are a traitor of the highest caliber. Your place is here," the master said calmly, and I looked at him in terror, trembling, afraid to answer. "Your place is here beside me. You have done enough to achieve glory and reach for your golden sun. Now you will bask here in the rays of your glory, and these meat sacks will praise you forever. Isn't that what you wanted? Glory, recognition, fame?" The master nodded, and I finally managed to squeeze out some words. "Yes, that's what I wanted before." "Interesting," the master replied and rubbed his chin. "And now you don't want it? Everything you've ever dreamed of and wanted is here. The public loves you here. They've been waiting for you." As soon as the master said this, people from everywhere started shouting my name and praising my achievements. They read my articles aloud, threw themselves at my feet, asked for autographs, and women of all shapes and ages shamelessly offered themselves to me with longing glances. "No," I squeezed out again, frightened. "I don't want this." The shouts of the people and the noise stopped again, and everyone scattered. "And what do you want?" The master looked at me curiously, waiting for my answer, and I was thinking about what to do or say. What does he expect from me? I want to feel regret for everything I've done, for all the betrayals I've committed, but I can't, even though I want to. I'm just not capable of it. I sincerely want to change. I want to fix what I've done. I don't want to follow the golden sun. I know you came to this because of fear from what you saw and fear of punishment, worm. I don't know how much time passed, but finally the master nodded, and I fell back onto the table. He came up to me and slowly cut open my chest with the claw of his index finger. My skin burned and melted, tissues and bones parted. He took me by the edges of the wound and opened them like shutters. I wanted, dreamed, to scream, wished for it all to stop, but I couldn't do anything. The master put his hand into my chest cavity and started drawing something on my heart. I was spitting blood, writhing in pain, breathing heavily, but I couldn't lose consciousness. The man slowly drew symbols I didn't understand on my heart, and when he finished, he simply closed the edges of the wound and cauterized it with the same claw. Sergey Kharin, you are a cheap traitor of the lowest quality. Your whole being is sharpened to rummage in someone else's dirty laundry and betray for weak, talentless articles. But have it your way. I have a task for you, and you will fulfill it when the time comes, the master said, looking intently at me. And then the steely gaze of his black eyes became even colder, and he added, "Now get out of here. Such a worm doesn't deserve to be here."